are. It's Advent. Look at what you've done, Derrick. It's beautiful. I wish everybody could see how great our church looks.
Yeah, it's amazing what some little lights and a little fake tree will bring some joy out.
I know, and I've never been more excited about being in the sanctuary. I'm just surprised by my own reactions when I walked in the door and saw how beautiful it looked and how much you decorated. So thank you for that. Thank you. And thank you for having coffee with me. I don't have coffee in my cup. But we have the cup.
I know, at this point it's just for show.
Oh, God. So as the staff and I were thinking about what we could do to get us through this season, one of the things we talked about was having the staff do a coffee with Cathy. It's been a while, and I really have missed that and just wanted to get back into that. And so today we're going to talk about hope. Hope. So I was thinking, how are you finding hope these days?
It's been hard. It's been hard to find, especially with everything that's been going on this year. You know, COVID aside, just the social unrest itself has been enough to do a person in. But I've made sure to find hope and joy in certain places. One of the most recent was with Georgia when it started to turn blue. Because as a Southerner, especially somebody from Alabama, I was like, that's not going to happen. I was like, that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And when that happened, it kind of reminded me, or not even reminded me, but was a confirmation that, you know, good work can, you know, have change to come from it at the end. And that, you know, nothing that I'm doing affected Georgia, but just, you know, the work that John Lewis did, the work that Stacey Abrams and all of the other black women that have been leading America have done is starting to pay off. And it just reminded me that even if we don't see the outcomes of some of the things we want in our lifetime, it's still worth finding that hope that future generations will get to experience that. And so Georgia flipping to blue to me was kind of that ringing true of that. People started that fight years before, and we're just now starting to see some of the results. And it kind of confirmed, you know, that's kind of what we do here at the church. It might not have immediate reaction, immediate change in the world, but over time, you know, the work that we do does hopefully impact people and does impact people past our lifetime. And that gave me a lot of hope for the future.
I think that's absolutely right, and it's certainly how I find hope, right? I find hope with our staff. I mean, you guys are amazing, and it's like I can be tired and just think I can't go on, and then you know, I'll come in and there's this, or something will happen at staff, or, you know, in our church family, right? Like as challenging as this has been, like it just feels to me like we're closer, like they're you know, we're more communal, you know, with the small groups, and people are caring for each other. And, you know, in a way, it seems to me that out of this darkness, right, out of this chaos, and it is chaotic to me, but there are hopes. And it seems like, you know, not only are we going to emerge somehow by God's good grace, but when we come through it, we will be stronger, right? And I've seen the generosity of people, the financial generosity and the spiritual generosity, right? And like even people that have lost their jobs, or with so much uncertainty, yet people are sacrificing, and they are caring, and they're meeting, and they're one more meeting on a Zoom call, right, to care about the church. And so that's hopeful for me. And you're right. I mean, like, we may not be around. I may not be around. Not that I'm planning to go anywhere, or certainly not planning to die, but I know that one day it will happen. But long after that, the seeds that we're planting today, like, we live on what others have done, and others will live on what we're doing. And so that really gives me a lot of hope.
Now, you've been here at the church for what, almost 10 years now?
Almost 10 years. Oh,
what is some of the change you've seen in the church and through hope through the church in your years here?
Well, certainly our numbers have grown, right? And people have joined. And I was in a meeting last week, and I was very aware of like how many young adults we have, how many people that are between age 30 and like 45. Right?
And that's usually the dead spot.
I know, and that's so exciting to me, and families and children. And of course, our members don't live in the neighborhood, so our folks come from all the boroughs. And for me, that's exciting, right? And that's a big change from when I first came. Also, I think that, you know, there's a deep-seated desire for the spiritual, which in a church is always good, right? I'm not saying that it wasn't here before, but people are on that journey. They're on that journey. And I was thinking about this week. Like Isaiah is doing this class on race and the church, right? And I've been excited because I haven't participated, but I've been excited, and I always get the word. But for the last 2 weeks, there have been like 16 and 17 people. Wow. So first of all, that we can have a class like that, right? And that we can have it in our congregation with so much diversity, right? Like racial and ethnic diversity, but also age diversity. And we're having this conversation that can be hard, right? That can be hard. And somehow we are creating that space. And what I'm well aware of, as people are telling me about their experiences of the class, is that, you know, you have to feel a certain level of safety to engage these hard conversations, because we are from everywhere. We're from the north and south and east and west, and our experiences are different. And here we are, right? And we're willing to put our toe in the water and have that conversation at this time. And I just think that's fabulous.
Well, yeah, and it's amazing too that many people, because that's, if anything, that's the class that, you know, you expect people to be like, we're not going to do that. We can't, we're not going to talk about that. But yeah, it's amazing that, and I don't think if COVID and everything that had happened this year, if that had not happened, I don't think everybody would have been in the space where we needed to talk about this. But it's quite obviously something that needs to be talked about across the board, across America, everywhere, even here. And I think it's great that people are showing up to that. Yeah,
it's very exciting. And you know, Liz made a comment the other day in staff when we were talking about it. And because, you know, usually people say, let's create safe space. But she said, let's create brave space, right? And it takes a bit of courage to engage, to say, you know what, I might not like it and I might be uncomfortable, but I'm gonna have the courage to engage because it's important, right? And people only do that when they feel like it's gonna be okay for them to be in that space. So one is the class itself, but also the people that have come and that willingness to say, I have something to learn here. And the people that are part of it, I love them and I can trust their love for me, right? And you know, it's all about that at the end of the day, So there have been a lot of other changes. You know, I'm excited about our children. You know, the work that Liz is doing and Molly are doing, because for me, you know, as a child of the church, right, I just feel like those early years are so important. And I just commend parents for also believing that give the children the fundamentals. You know, God only knows what we're going to do in the meantime, right? But we have something to come back to. And that's always been something that I was passionate about. Liz was actually the first person I hired when I came here, and she's been with me all this time. And I've watched her grow and become a mom and all of that. And certainly the lessons that are being taught, in the school, through Sunday school and all the other places, I just feel like when a child can learn early on, and I know you're a child of the church as well, you know, they can learn early on that there is this creator in the universe, right, who loves them, and parents who love them. And it's not perfect all the time. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's very messy, right? And but there's a place, there's something that can anchor them, something that they can come back to, even if it's 40 years You know, they go away, they do their own thing. But children don't forget. They don't forget. And they're going to need that. And I think that's just such good work. So those are two of the things that in this moment I'm very grateful for. And also that we have continued the theme of diversity here. And I know that's always been a linchpin of this church, but it is so true when we say all are welcome. All really are welcome, and all are serving in various areas of the church and leadership of the church, and that has continued to grow. And for me, that's huge. That's huge.
Well, I've been in churches, kind of like you said, all of my life, and I have yet to meet a community like this that is actually, and it's not what you expect when you hear Park Avenue United Methodist. It's not, in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And it really truly is a community that has its arms open. Yes, everybody has their certain quirks, their certain problems, but that's with every church. And this community, I haven't seen a group of people that truly, want to connect with each other in a spiritual way like this community does. And it's refreshing to see that. And it's one of the things that, we talk about the church with a capital C and all this stuff of, people have in their head what church is. And, every time, I have many friends that have been like, oh, I'm looking for a church, I'm looking for this. And I'm like, oh, we're United Methodist Church. They hear Park Avenue. And they're like, oh, maybe that's not really. I'm like, no, come see, at least try. And especially now that we have the live streaming up, it's much easier to say, here, look at this, take a moment. And on nine out of 10 times, it's not what they expect it to be.
So Derrick, how do you hang on to your hope in these times? What guides that for you?
How do I hang on to my hope? That's a good question. For me, my anchor is my mother. When anytime something happens, anytime I'll give her a call, and she always. Her words, even just the sound of her voice, because she's my mother, just makes everything line back up, and you go, okay, I know what I'm doing now. Everything's fine. And it's, and she's definitely not the type of woman that just, oh, everything's perfect, my little baby. She's not that type of mother. She's like, no, you need to get yourself together, and then you need to do this, and don't worry about them doing that over there. Just, And so my mother has definitely been my anchor through all of this, and always has been my anchor to reground myself and find hope and find, what does the future look like? And, so after a conversation with her, that always helps. What about you?
I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about it in terms of my faith, and faith versus trust, right? Because, I think you can have faith in terms of your belief. Like, I can believe God. I can believe there's a God, and there's a God who walks with me and us, right? And I can have that so deeply in my head and in my heart, right? Like I will defend that for myself with anybody. But I've realized more so this year that there's a thing called trust, right? And trust is when you don't see the signs. You see, you can believe when, okay, I still have my job, or my kids are well, or, I'm healthy, or, we have all the money we need to do what we need to do. When things are good, I can have a measure of faith, right? But when it's not, and you cannot see your way, and the numbers aren't adding up, then I just have to trust. Because I cannot see. And I have to abandon my desire for the outcome, right? And I just have to just surrender and say, though I don't see, I'm still going to trust that the one in whom I believe is able. He's able to take care of me, is able to take care of those that I love, is able to take care of this work that we're doing, right? That the one who began the good work is able, and God will. And so that's what brings me back to that hope, right? Like, yeah, I have to just trust. And that sometimes is hard.
Extremely hard.
It's really hard.
It's really hard.
And I thought I had it together. I really did, because, but you know, I'd had another experience of this, to be quite transparent, like almost 30 years ago when I went through my divorce, right? And, you know, my whole life was turned upside down. And I just, gosh, you know, I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't have a job. I had 2 children, 2 sons, and everything, right? And I'm just weighed down, and my heart is broken, and I just got all of this. But somehow, you know, I just began to trust, you know, and you just put one foot in front of the other, and you don't know how, but somehow, right? Yeah. You know, I preached the other week about give me that resolve, right? Somehow, you know, and then however, right? Instead of saying, you know, this is how I want it, then I have to say, however, you know, because I know you've got me, right? And that's what I find myself in now, is somehow, right? And I just have to trust that. I just have to trust that.
Yeah, and it's really hard to say, you know, I want all of these things in life, but I'm going to take a step back and go, you know what the world brings me, let's see where that takes me. And it's, you know, and I feel like it's, you know, as Black people, it's kind of in our bones, because, you know, to me, slavery, that's the ultimate test.
Yes.
That was the ultimate test of, you don't know what's going to happen, and your life is extremely horrible. But finding faith, and somehow they did it.
Yeah. And they believed for a better day. Like it wasn't even logical that their children or their children's children or children's children's children. But that was, and honestly, like with my parents and my foreparents, they believed more for me than they did for themselves. It was like they were okay to go through whatever if it could be better for their children or their grandchildren, right? And I've talked about this before, but sometimes I feel like I must I must keep trying because they tried so hard, right? I feel like there is a necessity, but not a burdensome one, right? But one that I'm obliged to do because they did. And, you know, they just so believed in education, right? And like with my parents, they didn't care what you studied. They weren't saying be a doctor, lawyer, or this or that. But they believed in education. And how could they believe when they couldn't afford to send their children? But somehow they believed it, right? And it happened by hard work and effort. It wasn't magical. So I know the value of belief and faith and trust when you surrender your children or your life or your presence in the world to a higher being. And you live into that, right? It's not like you believe and then you sit back, but you live into that day by day by day. Yeah.
What would your parents have to say to, let's see, the Reverend Dr. Cathy S. Gilliard in Park Avenue, in New York City, the big city?
Well, my dad would probably say, well, I always knew that girl was going to do something. And my mom would chime in and she would say, yeah, of course she was, right? Or whatever. But, they wouldn't be so impressed with all of that. But they would be proud, but in terms of, I think they would be more proud that I had found my niche. And so the where of it wouldn't, I don't think they would be in awe about that. But that, is she happy? you know, is she using her gifts? You know, is she making a difference, right? Like they, you know, that's what they would be happy about. My father would probably say, well, she should come home because there's so much COVID, you know, in New York. That's what my older brother was saying 8 months ago. But then there's COVID everywhere, right? So, but, you know.
We're rather low compared to some places.
Yes, that's right. That's why I didn't go anywhere. But I think they would be proud and happy if I was happy. And what about your parents? What do they say to you?
No, they're very happy when they came to visit. They've come to visit a couple times,
Yeah.
but it was definitely, especially I don't know if this, I haven't talked to him about it, but it seemed like for my dad it was a good moment, especially to see my name on the outside of the building, and to because I'm good now, but I wasn't always the best child. I mean, I was. In comparison to a lot of people, I was fine. But to them, everybody's individual experience is their individual experience, and I had my fair share of trouble and had my fair share of, and I talked about on Lady Sunday, at being done with the church a little bit for a little while, and I know my parents were both a little bit like, what's going to happen here? But to have me back in the church and in this role and this is kind of what I feel like he always saw for me, was working in the church and being a part. He's the lay leader at the church where I grew up, still is the lay leader, has been there, for all of my life, so 24 years.
Wow.
And so, he runs that building and he keeps it together. And so to have me here doing, similar things here, I think made him very proud. Mm-hmm. And so that made me happy to see him proud of this.
Well, I have to say that it's, when we're hiring people, we can't ask about their religious affiliation, but it gives me great joy that our staff are people of faith, and that I could see that faith growing. It makes a difference, right? It's not a gig. Yeah. It's not just, I'm supposed to work so many hours and I'm supposed to do this and that's all I do. Because in the church, there's always more. Mm-hmm. There are always things that need to be done. And so for me, I thank your parents, Isaiah's parents, because it just, you can tell it in the music. You can tell it in the decorations. You can tell it in the extra, like the gala, the fundraiser. That was all your work, the setup and everything. And people who are not invested from a higher place, they don't do the extras, mm-hmm. right? And that comes from a place of really wanting it to be a certain way, mm-hmm. really wanting it to be a success, and owning the outcome. So it makes a huge difference in the church, especially when people they come from a place of faith and belief and living out their gifts or their call versus, it's just something that I do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I mentioned this in my Lady Sunday thing, but, I used to always say when I was younger, God gave me a gift and I'm going to use it somehow. Yes. And it feels good to be using it here and being a part of this community and feeling welcomed into the community, and that alone gave me a lot of hope for the mm-hmm. church who'd coming here after being a part of the other church that I was a part of before, where it was very much so a job, it was a gig, and mm-hmm. it didn't feel right. It just mm-hmm. didn't feel right. Being here, where it's much more spiritual and we still run it like a business. We still get the work done. Yeah. But it's, there's space, there's grace. Mm-hmm. And that really rejuvenated my hope in the church. Yeah. What is your hope for the church in this crisis and going forward in the world?
Well, certainly, I hope that we'll get that vaccine really soon. Mm-hmm. I was really hoping that we could be back on Easter Sunday morning, and I don't know, but whenever we're back, I'm right now living for that Sunday, to be honest. Like, I just have so many images in my heart about what that's going to be when we actually look upon each other's faces, right? That's going to be a great day. In the meantime, I'm hoping that we will continue to stay connected, that we will continue to trust God, continue to do our work. And then when we are back together, that we really will be able to move now into a different awareness of who we can be, right? That we have made friendships and you know, I'm just so grateful for the pride that people take in the church and their belonging to it. And that will just continue to reverberate in us, but outside, so that people will see that. They'll see that, and it'll be a draw for people to come in. I think there's certainly a need for the church. There is a need for something that is wholesome and wonderful and bigger than all of us. And, you know, is it perfect? No, right? Is it smooth all the time? No. But there is a need, and God is here, and we are here. And so we'll do what we can as long as we can. And that's my hope, that we will just be able to continue and grow and meet the needs of one another and the community. What about you?
I very similar, yeah. I hope the church will, you know, stand up, especially with, you know, the social injustice and the racial injustice that it lives in America, and even within the United Methodist Conference in the church will, you know, we know it's there. And we don't need these big overtures of this or these worded letters. Just admit that it's there, and then let's work on it and fix it. You know, I often feel a lot of the times, you know, people want to make this big speech, make this big thing. I'm like, let's acknowledge that it's there and work on it and fix it. You know, instead of spending all this time talking about, oh, well, you did this to me and I did that to you and blah, 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 and it just turns into a fight. You know, I hope we can get past that this time and really work on fixing it and putting these messages, these, you know, the words that everybody has said to action once we get out of this, and being what the church should be. I believe that, everything that I've read from the Bible, everything that I've kind of paid attention to growing up in church, that out of the churches that I've been a part of, Park Avenue embodies what the church should be the most so far that I have seen. And I hope that there are other churches out there that can see what we're doing and help others in the same way, and in this way of, I feel like the church a lot of the times feels that it has to tell people, or wants to tell people, this is what you should believe, this is what an XYZ, where I feel like the church needs to take a little bit more of a position of, okay, here's what's in the Bible, here is, what we believe, now let's have a conversation about it, let's talk about it, what do you think on this? And, that having conversations about the world and God and Christ is much more inviting than, the hellfire, brimstone, you have to be this way. And I think we've passed that. I don't think the church can be that anymore. The people, they need a space. They want to have their voice heard as well. And I hope the church can rise to that. And I believe we do. We, just like this class that we're having, we tend to be good about having this conversation, especially the way you and Isaiah preach too. It's very inviting and open and almost open-ended. In a very good way. And so I hope the church can rise up to that and rise up to being for communities what they need, not what it thinks they need, but what they actually need.
Yeah, and and how about let's just try to live it, right? It's just get away from this notion of some kind of perfection, because that's what keeps people out, right? And I like to laugh. I laugh at myself a lot, as you know, but let's be human, right? Let's just be human. And sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we get it wrong, and it's okay. And then once we can accept that about ourselves, then we can also give that to someone else too, right? Like, you know, and I think that's part of our humanity, but it's also part of being Christian. It's modeling how God sees us, right? Like, God is not about like, you got to be perfect, you got to dot the I and cross the T. Well, if we could just do that, be spaces of grace for one another, right?
Well, and also to remind people is that, you know, what we consider perfection is our own definition of perfection.
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
God's.
That's right.
You know, and even down to the Bible, God did not write it down by his own hand or its own
No?
hand. It was. And so it's like, you know, let's breathe.
Yeah.
If any time
Yeah.
there ever was, now is the time to breathe.
Yes, yes,
You know.
yes, yes. And, you know, and baby steps, right? Like, gosh, sometimes a baby step can go a long way. It's a huge step, right? You know, somebody taking the class, that's a huge step. Or somebody letting something go, that's a huge step. And then tomorrow we might take a step back. Like, I was in the grocery store the other day, and, you know, I had to look around and pray that no church members were in there, you know? And I was like, oh, Jesus. And I got home, and then I looked at my devotional, and it said something like about be patient, or something like don't let somebody else, you know, ruin your day. And I was like, oh, God, I flunked today. You know, I got an F today. But that's part of it too, right? Like, and don't beat yourself up so bad, right? Like, you know, there's a way out. There's a way out. And we don't have to be so hard. Yeah. It doesn't have to be so hard all the time, right? And I think that is attractive for people, you know, is you know, so when we can lighten up a little bit, because there are some things that are hard, but not everything is that way, you know.
Well, it's, you know, yeah, and give yourself a little grace.
Yes.
Because, you know, this, I don't care who you are, but the pandemic, even if you think the pandemic's not affecting you, you think it's probably affecting you in some way, and that's okay.
Yes. If it's not, then something's
I know. Then something's probably actually wrong.
Oh, gosh.
But it's like, yeah, it's okay. It's like, breathe. I have to remind myself all the time. It's like, oh, I'm not doing this. I'm just like, breathe.
Yes.
It'll get done.
Yes.
It'll happen. Because I remember back in, what was this, it was March, back in March when we first started with the first live stream. We're like, oh, we'll be here for a couple weeks. We'll try to get back down by Easter. And then Easter went by and we're like, oh. And then the summer happened and we're like, oh, we'll be back here for Christmas, Christmas Eve. We'll do that. And then here we are.
I know, here we
but
are.
no, we're still alive.
We're still alive.
Kicking. We're still doing things, and we've figured it out. And it's okay.
It is okay. And, you know, I'm the kind of, I'm going to do my best. And some days my best may be more than other days. But if at the end of the day, I have done the best that I have for that day, I need to be okay with that, right? And because I think, you know, when all is said and done, that's what God wants, right? The best that we have for that day. And, you know, I know that you guys have worked really, really hard. You have worked really, really hard, and I'm so grateful for that. We have done our best, and our members have done their best. And to me, that's good church. That's really good church, and that is worth pursuing at all cost, and not getting it twisted about what the church is. Because if at the end of it, we are still standing, our faith is intact, we still care about each other, we've learned some things about ourselves that maybe we didn't know, right? But for love's sake, we have stretched, like this coffee with Cathy thing. But so many other things, right? Like if we can come out of this having grown, because it's a year of our time, it's a year of our life, right? And we don't know, you know, it could be another 6 months or 9 months, right? But to me, that's good church, that we haven't lost ourselves. We haven't lost our core, even among the many pandemics, right? That we have stayed true to ourselves and to our God. I think that's the best that we can do, yeah. So what is your Advent Christmas wish?
My Advent Christmas wish. My Advent Christmas wish is that, so something that I have been trying to do with myself and kind of reminding myself is that I kind of look at a lot of situations as either the ball is in my court and I have to work on something and I have to do something, or the ball is in somebody else's court. And something that, I've come to realize more recently, but in this past couple of years especially, is that when that ball is in someone else's court and you feel like, I don't have anything to do, what am I supposed to be doing, what is going on? Maybe that's a moment where you can go, I can take a break, I can breathe. And I've been learning to take advantage of more of those times when I've done the work that I can do right now, or at least everything that I know to do at the moment. Now, a couple hours might go by, a day might go by, and I come up with something else that needs to be done. But for that moment, I've done everything that I can do with this problem. The ball is in somebody else's court or it's in the world's court. All I can do is sit back and just breathe. And that is my hope for the world and everybody through all that we're beginning to tackle, especially with the social unrest and the racial inequality, is remember to breathe and find those moments to breathe. And what about you?
Yeah, very similar. I just think it would be sad if we came through all of this, right? Because so many things have been exposed in these last months. And we're the same. We're thinking the same, or we're, that it didn't, because I think if COVID-19 and the other pandemics, if they have their perfect work in us, like any kind of trial, then we grow from it. Very similar to what you're saying, right? That we've had those moments of aha, right? Those moments where I was like, whoa, I learned something about me. I learned what trust really is, or I learned something about my partner or my spouse or my children or the people that really love me, right? Or that the people that I have to be a little distant from right now because I don't have the capacity, right? To come through all of this and be the same would be a great tragedy, right? So my hope and my prayer is that that we grow from it, that we grow from it individually, and that we grow from it as a community and as a country, right? How did we get here, right? And then not blaming everyone else, but saying, how can I be different, right? Like I like to say, people like, the country is this. Well, you're part of the country. And if you want a different country, then you take on your own agency where you can to make the country or the church or whatever it is better, right? And don't diminish your own power. Can you change it all? No. But you certainly can change something, right? And just that whole awareness of one's own agency. That we learn something that makes us better in the world. Whereas before we might have let something slide. Now we realize that to do that could cause great harm, right? And, sometimes we need to speak up, right, when there's an issue, but sometimes maybe we need to be silent, right? So just that whole learning and growth, and ownership. So, yeah.
Oh, I hope that comes true.
I do too. I think that, again, we're talking about faith and hope. But I know if we're sincere about it, if it is a desire of our heart, if it's something I'm praying about and I really want, it will come true for me, right? And that's all I can really change is me, right? We can inspire people, we can encourage people, but ultimately the work is on each of us individually. And if that's what I really want, it may be baby steps, but they're steps nonetheless. Yeah. And if all of us make steps, right, then we'll get there.
Imagine if everybody took one step, even one step a week,
Just one step, yeah.
to help somebody else. It doesn't have to be out of your way. Just one help. We'd all be helped by somebody else at some point.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And the world would be better, right? Or even if that step is just a different consciousness, right? Like, oh, gosh, that's what that's like. Yeah. And then I'm going to be more mindful, right? Because now I know, right? And so I believe the world, I believe it's possible. And I think when it's a crisis and when we've been shaken to the core, and we can come out bitter, or that saying, we can come out better. And what might that look like for each person individually, right? But I want to be better, because I don't want to throw away a year of my life to COVID, right, or to anything, and be the same. So,
yeah. Oh gosh, I guess maybe I should take a sip from the cup now.
From the
empty,
air.
the empty. Oh gosh.
So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you do. Thanks to your parents. I hope you have, I don't know if you're going to see them this holiday, but I hope that, you'll have a wonderful holiday and gratitude. And as a mother of sons, I'm glad to hear you say that your mother is your rock. I'm just thinking, I wonder if my boys would say that. They better.
No,